The emergency alarms echoed through the massive space station called Ember's Crown. Inside the main council chamber, dozens of alien representatives sat in worried silence. These weren't just any aliens. They were Drakenari, massive dragon-like creatures that stood 12 feet tall, covered in shimmering scales that changed colors with their moods. Right now, every single scale in the room pulsed with dark red and black. Anger, fear, desperation. At the head of the table stood High Matriarch Vesa, the oldest and most powerful Drakenari in 7-star systems. Her wings were folded tight against her back, a sign of barely controlled rage. Her golden eyes swept across the room, and when she spoke, her voice made the walls vibrate. 7 hatchlings are missing. The room exploded with shocked hisses and roars. 7 hatchlings. Not just any hatchlings but royal bloodline babies. Each one destined to grow up and govern an entire planet someday. And they had vanished like smoke in the wind. Vesa slammed her massive clawed hand on the table, instantly silencing everyone. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks, our children have been disappearing one by one. No traces. No clues. No ransom demands. Nothing. A younger Drakenari named Torek stepped forward. He was the station's security commander, and right now he looked like he hadn't slept in days. His scales were dull and faded, his movements tired. "We've reviewed every second of security footage," Torek said quietly. "The hatchlings slip out of the royal nursery during sleep cycles. They're clever about it too. They wait until the guards change shifts. They squeeze through ventilation shafts that we didn't think were big enough. They disable door sensors somehow. But every single trail goes cold in the commercial district." "How is that possible?" demanded another council member. "Our hatchlings are telepathic. We should be able to sense them anywhere on this station. It's impossible to hide them. Unless someone is blocking their telepathic signals," Vesa said darkly. "Which means we're dealing with either very advanced technology or someone with psionic abilities strong enough to mask 7 young minds." The room fell silent again. That kind of power was rare and dangerous. Torek shifted uncomfortably. "There is one pattern we've identified. It might be nothing but—" "Speak," Vesa commanded. "A human freighter has been docked at our station during each disappearance. The ship is called the Wandering Margaret. It's registered to a solo trader named— He checked his datapad. "Jack Webb. Human male, age 40, former colony farmer. He hauls agricultural supplies. Seeds, grain, basic food stocks. Nothing suspicious in his cargo. He's passed every inspection we've thrown at him." "Then inspect him again," Vesa growled. "We have. Twice. The ship is clean. The human is clean. His background check shows nothing concerning. He's just a simple trader trying to make a living." "I don't believe in coincidences," Vesa said. Her tail lashed behind her, knocking over an empty chair. "Every time a hatchling vanishes, this human is here. That's not chance. That's pattern." A diplomatic advisor named Kara spoke up carefully. "High Matriarch, the human embassy has already filed protests. We've detained Webb twice without cause. If we arrest him without evidence, it could create serious political problems. Humans are new to the galactic community, but they have powerful allies now." Vesa's eyes flashed with barely contained fury. "My daughter's hatchling is among the missing. My grandchild. Do you understand what that means to me?" Everyone in the room understood perfectly. Drakenari were fiercely protective of their young. The fact that Vesa hadn't already burned down half the station looking for her grandchild showed incredible restraint. "I'll give you 48 hours, Vesa said coldly. "Find my grandchild. Find all 7 hatchlings. I don't care about political problems or diplomatic incidents. If this human is involved, I want him found. If he's innocent, I want proof. And if you can't give me answers in 2 days." She spread her massive wings, filling half the room. "Then I'll call in the Drakenari fleet, and we'll tear this station apart piece by piece until we find our children." Torek swallowed hard. A Drakenari fleet meant warships. Lots of them. And angry dragon warriors who wouldn't care about things like due process or property damage. "We'll find them, High Matriarch," he promised, though his voice shook slightly. "You'd better," Vesa replied. "Because I've already lost 3 weeks with my grandchild. I won't lose another day." As the council members filed out to begin the search, Kara approached Vesa privately. The Mentalist was one of the few Drakenari with strong telepathic abilities, even for their species. "What if the hatchlings left willingly?" Kara asked softly. Vesa turned to her sharply. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet. But you know as well as I do that the hatchlings have been restless lately. All of them. Not just the 7 who disappeared. The nursery staff has reported increasing behavioral problems. Sleep disturbances, anxiety, aggressive outbursts. They're being prepared for leadership, Vesa said firmly. It's always been this way. Has it? Kara challenged gently. Or have we convinced ourselves it should be this way because it's tradition? Vesa didn't answer. She couldn't. Because deep down, in a place she rarely acknowledged, she wondered the same thing. Her own daughter had struggled as a hatchling. So had Vesa herself, though she'd never admitted it to anyone. Find them, Vesa said finally. Whatever the truth is, I need to know my grandchild is safe. Everything else can wait. Kara bowed her head and left, already planning the search. As she walked through the station's corridors, she noticed something she'd overlooked before. The missing hatchlings were all from the same group in the nursery. The sensitive ones. The ones who startled easily at loud noises. The ones who had trouble sleeping when there was too much chaos around them. It might mean nothing. Or it might mean everything. She pulled up the docking schedule on her datapad. The human freighter was due to arrive again in 6 hours for a scheduled supply delivery. This time they'd be ready. This time they'd find answers. One way or another, the mystery of the missing hatchlings would be solved before Vesa's deadline ran out. Because nobody wanted to see what an angry dragon grandmother would do if they failed. Jack Webb had seen some strange things in his 10 years of hauling cargo across the galaxy, but nothing quite prepared him for the sight of 6 heavily armed dragon warriors standing at his ship's airlock. Each one was massive, easily twice his height, with scales that gleamed like polished metal under the station's harsh lights. Their claws scraped against the deck plating as they shifted impatiently, and their eyes glowed with barely contained hostility. Can I help you folks?" Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. His hands were already raised in a universal gesture of non-threat. He'd learned that lesson the hard way during his early trading days. The lead warrior, whose name tag read Commander Torek, didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Jack Webb, by order of the High Matriarch, your vessel will be searched immediately. Step aside." Again? Jack couldn't help the exasperation in his voice. "Look, you guys already searched my ship twice this month. I'm carrying wheat seeds and dried corn. That's it. I'm not exactly running guns or exotic contraband here." "Step aside," Torek repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl that made Jack's survival instincts scream at him to comply. Jack stepped aside. What followed was the most thorough search Jack had ever experienced, and he'd been through plenty of inspections over the years. The Drakenari warriors moved through his ship like a natural disaster. They opened every storage container. They scanned every wall panel. They even checked inside his coffee maker, which seemed excessive, but Jack wasn't about to argue with creatures that could probably bite him in half. His ship, the Wandering Margaret, wasn't much to look at. She was a small freighter, maybe 40 years old, patched and repaired so many times that barely any of the original hull remained. But she was his home. The cargo bay held his legitimate stock of agricultural supplies. The tiny galley smelled permanently of coffee and whatever instant meal he'd heated up last. His quarters were cramped but comfortable, decorated with a few photos from his old life and a shelf of actual paper books he'd collected over the years. "Your ship is small," observed one of the warriors, having to duck her head to avoid hitting the ceiling. "Yeah, well, it's just me," Jack replied. "Don't need much space when you're flying solo." Torek was examining the cargo bay with a handheld scanner, checking for hidden compartments or shielded areas. "Why do you travel alone?" "Most human traders work in pairs at minimum." Jack shrugged. "Prefer my own company, I guess. Simpler that way." "Simpler or safer?" Torek's golden eyes fixed on him with uncomfortable intensity. "What are you running from, human?" "I'm not running from anything," Jack said, which wasn't entirely true, but his past wasn't their business. "I just like the quiet." "Is that a crime now?" The search continued for over an hour. Jack watched his carefully organized supplies get pulled apart and rest-tacked haphazardly. He watched them scan his personal belongings, read his message logs, and examine every centimeter of his ship. They found nothing suspicious because there was nothing suspicious to find. Finally, Torek seemed ready to give up. "The ship is clean," he admitted reluctantly. "I apologize for the inconvenience, Captain Webb." "Yeah, sure," Jack muttered. "I'll just spend the next 3 hours reorganizing everything." But one of the younger warriors, a lean male named Kellen, wasn't ready to leave. He stood in the doorway of Jack's personal quarters, his head tilted like he was listening to something. "Commander," Kellen said quietly, "there's a heat signature in here. Behind the wall. It doesn't match any known technology." Jack's stomach dropped. Oh no. Oh no no no. Torek was in the room in two massive strides. Show me. Kellen pointed to a section of wall near Jack's bunk. There. Standard bulkhead should be cool, but this is reading at 95 degrees. And there's airflow. Like something is breathing. That's just my emergency supply panel, Jack said quickly. Maybe too quickly. I keep backup rations there. Some of them are heat-sealed packages that. Open it, Torek commanded. Jack considered lying. He considered running. He briefly considered jumping out the airlock. But none of those options would end well for him. So with trembling hands he reached for the panel and pressed the hidden release. The panel swung open. Inside was a nest. There was no other word for it. Jack had built it over the past 3 weeks using every soft thing he could find. Heated blankets he'd bought from the station shops. Pillows he'd borrowed from the station's luxury quarters during a late-night panic. Spare clothes. Even his good winter jacket that he'd been saving for when he visited cold planets. And curled up in that nest, sleeping peacefully in a tangled pile of scales, wings and tails, were 7 dragon hatchlings. They were beautiful. Each one was about the size of a large dog, covered in scales that shimmered with iridescent colors. Their wings were folded against their bodies, twitching occasionally as they dreamed. Soft rumbling sounds came from the pile, like a group of kittens purring. And right in the middle of them all, also fast asleep, was Jack. Or rather, a thermal image of where Jack had been sleeping before the warriors woke him up. The smallest hatchling, barely bigger than a house cat, had claimed the spot on his chest, its tiny head resting right over where Jack's heart would be. The silence in the room was deafening. Kellen stared. Torek stared. The other warriors crowded into the doorway, staring. Jack raised his hands again, this time in surrender. Okay, look, I can explain. You kidnapped 7 royal hatchlings, Torek said, his voice eerily calm. The kind of calm that came right before explosive violence. No, I didn't kidnap anyone. They came to me. Dragons do not simply come to random humans. Well, these ones did. Jack's voice cracked with stress. The first one showed up 3 weeks ago. I was unloading cargo and I heard this crying sound. Scared little chirps. I found the little guy shivering in a corner of my cargo bay. He was cold and scared and I didn't know what else to do, so I wrapped him in a blanket and gave him some of my dried meat. I was going to call station security immediately, I swear, but then he fell asleep on me and his tail wrapped around my arm, and when I tried to move, he started making these horrible distressed sounds. The hatchling in question, slightly larger than the others, chose that moment to wake up. It lifted its head, saw Jack, and made a happy chirping sound. Then it noticed the Drakenari warriors and the happy chirps turned into alarmed squeaks. The little dragon scrambled out of the nest and wrapped itself around Jack's leg, trembling. It's okay, buddy, Jack said automatically, reaching down to pat the hatchling's head. They're your people. They're here to take you home. But the hatchling just gripped tighter and made a low, unhappy whine. You claim you tried to return them? Torek asked, watching this interaction with unreadable eyes. Yes. But when I came back to the station a week later, another one found me. Then another. They kept tracking me down somehow. And every time I tried to bring them to someone official, they'd start screaming. Like telepathically screaming. It gave me the worst headache of my life. So I just kept them. Fed them. Kept them warm. I figured someone would eventually notice and come looking. And you hid them in your wall. I didn't want anyone to get the wrong idea. Jack protested. Which, let's be honest, is exactly what's happening right now. I'm not a kidnapper. I'm just a guy who got adopted by 7 baby dragons and had no idea how to handle it. Torek opened his mouth to respond but stopped. One by one the other hatchlings were waking up. And one by one they were reacting the same way as the first. They saw Jack, chirped happily, then noticed the strange Drakenari warriors and panicked. Within moments, Jack had 7 baby dragons climbing on him, wrapping around his legs, clinging to his arms, and generally treating him like he was their personal safe haven. Get the High Matriarch, Torek said quietly. Get her now. Because this situation had just become a lot more complicated than a simple kidnapping. High Matriarch Vesa arrived at the Wandering Margaret like a storm rolling in from the horizon. Jack could hear her coming before he saw her. The heavy thud of clawed feet on metal decking. The scrape of scales against the corridor walls. The way every other sound on the station seemed to go quiet, as if the entire universe was holding its breath. When she entered his cramped quarters, she had to fold her wings tight and duck her head just to fit through the doorway. She was enormous, easily the largest Drakenari Jack had ever seen. Her scales were deep crimson with threads of gold running through them like veins of precious metal. Her eyes glowed with an inner fire that made Jack think of volcanoes and funeral pyres. Those eyes locked onto him with an intensity that made his knees weak. He'd faced angry creditors, hostile pirates, and even a malfunctioning reactor core once, but nothing had ever terrified him quite like the gaze of an angry dragon grandmother. "You," Vesa said, her voice low and dangerous, "are the human who dared to steal my grandchild." Jack opened his mouth to defend himself, but before he could speak, something unexpected happened. The hatchlings woke up. All 7 of them lifted their heads at once, and when they saw Vesa, they didn't cower or hide. Instead they started chirping excitedly. The smallest one, the one that always slept on Jack's chest, scrambled up his body like he was a tree, perched on his shoulder, and let out a series of happy squeaks directly into his ear. Then, in a moment that would be burned into Jack's memory forever, all 7 hatchlings rushed toward Vesa. For a heartbeat, Jack thought they were going to their grandmother. That this whole nightmare would be over and he could go back to his simple life of hauling grain and avoiding complicated situations. But the hatchlings didn't go to Vesa. They went around her, circled back, and swarmed Jack again. The smallest one remained on his shoulder. 2 others wrapped around his legs. One climbed onto his back. The 3 remaining ones positioned themselves between Jack and Vesa, spreading their tiny wings in what was clearly meant to be a protective stance, even though they were barely bigger than house cats facing down a dragon the size of a small truck. They were protecting him. From her. Vesa's expression shifted from rage to confusion to something Jack couldn't quite identify. Pain maybe. Or loss. "Step away from the human," Vesa said, her voice softer now but still commanding. "Come to me, little ones. You're safe now." The hatchlings didn't move. One of them, a brave little female with silver-blue scales, actually hissed at Vesa. A tiny, squeaky hiss that would have been adorable under different circumstances. "I don't understand," Vesa whispered. "I'm your blood. Your family. Why do you choose a stranger over your own kind?" "I don't think they see it as choosing," said a new voice. Another Drakenari entered the room, this one smaller and leaner than the warriors. Her scales were a pale purple color, and her eyes held a gentler expression. "May I approach, High Matriarch?" Vesa nodded stiffly. The purple Drakenari moved slowly toward the pile of hatchlings surrounding Jack. She closed her eyes, and Jack felt a strange tingling sensation in his mind, like someone was gently knocking on a door inside his head. "I'm Kara," the purple Drakenari said. "I'm a mentalist. I can sense thoughts and emotions, especially from young ones whose telepathic shields aren't fully developed yet. I'd like to understand what the hatchlings are feeling, if you'll permit me, human." "Jack," he said automatically. "My name's Jack. And yeah, sure, whatever helps sort this mess out." Kara's eyes remained closed as she focused. The hatchlings watched her warily but didn't move away. After a long moment, Kara's eyes opened and she looked stunned. "High Matriarch," she said slowly, "the hatchlings weren't taken. They searched for him. Actively. Deliberately." "That's impossible," Vesa said flatly. "It's the truth. I can feel their memories. The first one escaped the nursery because he couldn't sleep. Too much noise. Too much chaos. Too many emotions pressing in from every direction. He wandered the station for hours until he sensed something different. A mind that was quiet. Peaceful. Like still water. He followed that feeling and found the human." Jack blinked. "Wait, you're saying this little guy," he gestured to the one on his shoulder, "tracked me down because I'm boring?" "Not boring," Kara corrected. "Calm. Your mind radiates a deep inner stillness that the hatchlings find soothing. To young Drakenari, who are constantly bombarded with telepathic noise from thousands of minds on this station, your presence is like finding silence in the middle of a thunderstorm." "I still don't understand why he kept them hidden," Vesa interjected, her tail lashing behind her. "Because I tried to return them." Jack protested, his fear finally giving way to frustration. "The first one, okay fine, he fell asleep on me and I couldn't move without upsetting him. But when I docked here again a week later and a second one showed up, I immediately tried to find a station official. Do you know what happened?" The hatchlings started screaming. Telepathically. It felt like my brain was splitting in half. I made it maybe 50 feet down the corridor before I had to turn back. "They were afraid," Kara said softly. "Afraid of being separated from the one source of peace they'd found. Each hatchling that found you passed the information to others through their telepathic network. There's a quiet place. A safe place. Find the human on the ship that smells like growing things." Vesa was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was strained. Are you saying my grandchild was so distressed in our royal nursery that he fled to a random alien trader for comfort? Not random, Kara said. Specific. The human isn't using technology or psionics to attract them. His mind is naturally this way. And yes, High Matriarch, your grandchild was distressed. They all were. Still are, in some ways, though being near the human has helped significantly. Jack felt like he'd wandered into the middle of a family drama he had no business being part of. The smallest hatchling, seemingly sensing his discomfort, nuzzled against his neck and made a soft, comforting sound. What did you do with them? Vesa asked, her voice carefully neutral now. These past 3 weeks. How did you care for them? I just did what made sense? Jack said, unsure how to explain. They were cold, so I got them blankets and heated them up. They were hungry, so I fed them. They couldn't sleep, so I made it dark and quiet. I talked to them in a soft voice. I let them sleep on me because that's what they seemed to want. I mean, I grew up on a farm colony. We raised livestock. Baby animals need pretty much the same things across species, right? Food, warmth, safety, and someone to let them know they're not alone. You treated royal hatchlings like farm animals? One of the warriors sounded offended. I treated scared children like they needed to be treated, Jack shot back, finding his courage. With patience and kindness. Is that such a weird concept? Vesa studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at her grandchild, still perched protectively on Jack's shoulder. Come here, little one. Come to your grandmother. The hatchling looked at Vesa, then at Jack, then back at Vesa. It made a questioning chirp. It's okay, Jack said gently, reaching up to stroke the hatchling's head. She's your family. She loves you. You should go to her. The hatchling hesitated, then slowly climbed down Jack's arm. It walked across the floor toward Vesa, each step careful and uncertain. When it reached her, Vesa lowered her massive head and touched her snout to the tiny dragon's forehead. For a moment, Jack saw the fierce matriarch's mask slip. He saw a grandmother reunited with a grandchild she'd feared was lost forever. He saw love and relief and bone-deep exhaustion. Then the hatchling turned around and scrambled back to Jack, climbing up his leg and resuming its position on his shoulder. The silence in the room was painful. I see, Vesa said quietly. Then she looked at Jack with an expression he couldn't read. Human. Jack Webb. You will remain on this station. You will not leave. We have much to discuss. Am I under arrest? That depends, Vesa said, on whether you're willing to help us understand what we've been doing wrong. And with that cryptic statement, she turned and left, leaving Jack surrounded by 7 baby dragons and a dozen questions he didn't have answers for. Retry SF. Jack found himself standing in the middle of the Drakenari Royal Nursery 2 days later, and he'd never felt more out of place in his entire life. The room was massive, designed for creatures twice his size. Everything was built from polished metal and stone, all sharp angles and hard surfaces. Bright lights blazed from panels in the ceiling, making everything gleam with an almost painful intensity. And the noise. Dear God, the noise. There were easily 30 hatchlings in the nursery, ranging from newborns to adolescents nearly 4 feet tall. They screeched, roared, wrestled, and charged around the space in what appeared to be barely controlled chaos. Adult Drakenari caretakers stood along the walls, watching with stern expressions, occasionally barking orders that the hatchlings mostly ignored. This is how we've raised our young for thousands of years, Vesa said beside him. She'd brought him here to observe, along with Kara and several senior council members. We believe in preparing hatchlings for leadership from the moment they can walk. Competition makes them strong. Constant stimulation keeps them sharp. The weak are identified early and given extra training. Jack watched a group of 5 hatchlings fighting over a piece of synthetic meat. The largest won, and the others slunk away with their heads down, clearly distressed. How much do they sleep? Jack asked. Sleep schedules vary. Hatchlings rest when exhausted, usually in shifts. There's always activity in the nursery. Always something happening. We don't believe in coddling. And how long do they sleep when they do rest? Vesa frowned. 3, perhaps 4 hours at a time. Hatchlings are naturally restless. It's their way. Jack turned to look at her. The 7 hatchlings on my ship sleep 10 to 12 hours straight. Every night. On a schedule. The caretakers exchanged glances. One of them, an older male with scarred silver scales, spoke up. That's impossible. Hatchlings don't sleep that long. They're too energetic. They do when they're not stressed out of their minds, Jack replied. He knew he was being blunt, maybe too blunt, but someone needed to say it. Look at them. Actually look. Half these kids are exhausted. See that little one in the corner? The green one? Her eyes are barely staying open, but she's forcing herself to stay awake because she's afraid of missing something or being seen as weak. She's building endurance, the silver-scaled caretaker insisted. She's suffering, Jack countered. There's a difference between building strength and just inflicting stress. Trust me, I know. I grew up on a farming colony where the adults thought the same way. Work hard, sleep less, toughen up. You know what happened? Half the kids developed anxiety problems. The other half left the colony the moment they were old enough. Vessa's tail twitched, a sign of irritation. You dare compare royal hatchlings to human farm children? I'm comparing children to children, Jack said. Species doesn't matter as much as you think. Young brains need rest to develop properly. Young bodies need consistent sleep to grow. And young hearts need to feel safe, or they'll spend their whole lives afraid. Kara stepped forward, her purple scales catching the harsh light. What would you do differently, Jack? If you were in charge of this nursery, what would you change? Jack looked around the room, mentally cataloging everything wrong with it. First, I'd dim these lights. They're way too bright. Hatchlings need to learn the difference between day and night, active time and rest time. Keep it bright during the day if you want, but when it's time to sleep, it should be dark. Actually dark. Darkness is dangerous, the silver caretaker protested. Hatchlings could injure themselves. Then use night lights. Soft ones. Just enough to navigate safely, but not enough to keep their brains in alert mode. Jack pointed to the walls. Second, I'd add soft things. Padding. Blankets. Cushions. Everything here is hard metal and stone. You're raising children, not training soldiers. Softness breeds weakness, another council member said. Comfort breeds security, Jack shot back. And secure children grow into confident adults. Anxious children grow into anxious adults who pretend to be confident but fall apart under real pressure. Which do you want leading your planets? The room fell silent. Jack was on a roll now, his years of frustration with harsh colonial upbringings pouring out. Third, I'd establish routines. Consistent meal times. Consistent play times. Consistent bedtimes. Children thrive on predictability. Makes them feel safe. This chaos, he gestured at the wrestling hatchlings, isn't stimulation. It's overwhelming. Our hatchlings need to learn to handle chaos, Vessa said, but her voice was less certain now. The universe is chaotic. And they'll handle it better if they have a stable foundation to return to, Jack argued. You can't pour from an empty cup. These kids are running on empty, constantly stressed, never fully resting. No wonder 7 of them ran away to find peace. Kara's eyes were distant, her telepathic senses extending through the nursery. He's right, High Matriarch. Now that I'm paying attention, I can feel it. The ambient stress level in this room it's like standing in a hurricane. The hatchlings' minds are screaming at frequencies most adults have learned to tune out. What else? Vessa asked Jack, her voice quiet. Quiet time. Actual enforced quiet time. Maybe an hour in the morning and an hour before bed where everyone stays calm. Soft voices only. Gentle activities. Reading stories maybe, or just sitting together. Time for their nervous systems to settle. Stories? The silver caretaker looked confused. Yeah, stories. Humans tell stories to kids before bed. It calms them down, helps them transition from active time to sleep time. Don't you do that? We teach them history lessons and tactical scenarios, Vessa said. Jack stared at her. Before bed? You're teaching battle tactics to exhausted children right before you expect them to sleep peacefully? It's educational. It's insane. Jack ran his hand through his hair in frustration. No wonder they can't sleep. You're getting their little brains all worked up right when they should be winding down. Tell them gentle stories. Funny stories. Boring stories even. The point isn't education, it's comfort. One of the younger caretakers, a female with bright orange scales, spoke up hesitantly. When I was a hatchling, my grandmother used to hum to me. Just soft sounds, nothing fancy. I always slept well after that. But when I tried it here, I was told it was too soft. Too indulgent. That's exactly what they need, Jack said. Humming, singing, soft sounds. White noise even. On my ship, I play recordings of rain and wind. The hatchlings love it. It masks the station's mechanical sounds and gives them something peaceful to focus on. Vessa looked at her council members, then back at Jack. You're suggesting we fundamentally change how we raise our young based on human methods. Methods designed for a completely different species. I'm suggesting you actually watch your children and see what they need instead of forcing them to fit a tradition that's clearly not working. Jack softened his tone. Look, I'm not trying to insult your culture. But 7 hatchlings ran away. 7 royal babies were so desperate for peace that they fled to a complete stranger. That should tell you something's broken. Show us, Vesa said suddenly. Don't just tell us. Show us how you do it. Jack blinked. What? You'll stay on the station for 1 month. We'll set up a demonstration nursery. A small one with volunteers. Hatchlings whose parents agree to try your methods. You'll teach our caretakers how to do what you do naturally. If it works, we'll consider implementing changes station-wide. If it doesn't, she left the threat unspoken. And if I refuse? Then you'll be charged with kidnapping regardless of the hatchling's wishes. The council demands answers and I've convinced them to give your way a chance. Don't waste it. Jack looked at the exhausted hatchlings running around the nursery, forcing themselves to keep moving because rest was seen as weakness. He thought about the 7 little ones sleeping peacefully on his ship, their small bodies finally relaxed and safe. Fine, he said. 1 month. But I'm doing this my way completely. No interference, no second guessing. You want to see if it works? Then let me actually do it. Vesa extended one massive clawed hand. Jack hesitated, then shook it, his hand disappearing in her grip. 1 month, Vesa agreed. Prove that a human farmer knows more about raising dragons than we do. Jack couldn't tell if she was being sarcastic or sincere. Maybe both. But he'd agreed now, and he'd never backed down from a challenge in his life. Even if this particular challenge involved teaching ancient space dragons how to tuck their children into bed. The demonstration nursery was ready 3 days later. It was a smaller room, far from the main nursery, and Jack had spent those 3 days transforming it completely. The harsh overhead lights were gone, replaced by soft, adjustable panels that could dim to almost nothing. The cold metal floors now had thick, padded mats covering them. Piles of blankets and cushions filled the corners. A sound system played gentle rain sounds on a loop. The temperature was warm but not hot, carefully regulated. 12 hatchlings had volunteered. Well, their parents had volunteered them, but the little ones seemed curious enough about the strange human and his quiet room. The original 7 were there too, of course, refusing to be separated from Jack for long. A crowd of Draconari observers lined the walls, including Vesa, Kara, and at least 20 caretakers and council members. They watched skeptically as Jack sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by 19 baby dragons of various sizes and colors. All right, everyone, Jack said softly. Welcome. First rule, we use quiet voices in here. Not because loud is bad, but because this is a resting space. Think of it like a library or a temple. Peaceful places need peaceful sounds. The hatchlings stared at him. A few whispered to each other in their chirping language. Second rule, no fighting. You can play, but gentle play only. If someone says stop, you stop immediately. Everyone here is safe. Everyone here is respected. One of the new hatchlings, a stocky male with dark green scales, made a challenging rumble. Jack recognized the posture. This one was used to being the tough guy, the dominant one in his group. Yeah, I see you, buddy, Jack said calmly. You're strong. Everyone can tell. But strength isn't about who can beat up who. Real strength is knowing when to be gentle. That's actually harder. The green hatchling looked confused but sat down. Third rule, if you're tired, sleep. Don't fight it. Don't be embarrassed. Sleep is how you grow, how you learn, how you heal. It's not weakness, it's maintenance. You wouldn't call a warrior weak for sharpening their sword, right? Sleep is sharpening your mind. Jack pulled out a worn book from his bag. It was an old children's story from Earth, something about a rabbit and a velveteen toy. He'd read it 100 times to the original 7. Story time, he announced. Everyone get comfortable. The hatchlings arranged themselves around him. The original 7 immediately piled onto him, their favorite spots already claimed. The new ones watched and slowly edged closer, curiosity winning over caution. Jack began to read. His voice was low and steady, almost monotone. Not boring exactly, but deliberately calm. He'd learned that excited, animated reading got the hatchlings worked up. This gentle, almost hypnotic tone helped them relax. 10 minutes in, the smallest of the original 7 was already asleep on his lap. 15 minutes and 3 more had dozed off. The observers whispered among themselves, but Kara shushed them with a gesture. By the time Jack finished the story, 11 of the 19 hatchlings were sleeping. The remaining 8 were drowsy, blinking slowly. Good job, everyone, Jack whispered. Those who are awake, you can play quietly or rest. Your choice. No pressure. He set the book aside and simply sat there, letting the hatchlings do whatever felt right. Two started playing a very gentle game with a soft ball Jack had made from rolled-up fabric. The others just rested, not quite asleep but not active either. Peaceful. The green hatchling who'd been challenging earlier approached Jack slowly. It nudged his hand with its snout. "Hey there," Jack murmured, scratching behind the little dragon's ear ridges. "Tired?" The hatchling made a soft sound and curled up against Jack's leg. Within minutes it was snoring. One of the observing caretakers, the older silver-scaled male who'd been most resistant, stepped forward. "This is a trick. You're using some kind of human telepathy or chemical pheromone. There's no way simple stories and soft voices could." "Shoo," Jack said, not rudely but firmly. "Quiet voices. You'll wake them." The caretaker looked offended but lowered his voice. "How are you doing this?" "I'm not doing anything to them," Jack whispered back. "I'm just creating an environment where their bodies can do what they naturally want to do. Rest. Everything in your main nursery fights against rest. Everything here supports it. That's the only difference." Over the following days, Jack established a routine. Morning wake up at the same time every day, with gradually brightening lights to simulate sunrise. Breakfast together with calm conversation. Playtime but structured and supervised. Learning time but with age-appropriate activities that didn't stress them out. Watch. Quiet time with stories or music. More play. Dinner. Wind down time with dimmed lights. Bedtime story. Sleep. Every single day the same schedule. The hatchlings' bodies learned the rhythm. They started getting sleepy at bedtime automatically because their internal clocks knew what was coming. The changes were remarkable. Within a week, the hatchlings in Jack's program were sleeping 9 to 10 hours straight. Their scales looked brighter. Their eyes were clearer. They played with more energy during active time because they actually had energy to spare. The aggressive behaviors decreased dramatically because they weren't constantly stressed and exhausted. But the most surprising development came at the end of the second week. Jack was doing evening story time when a hatchling from outside the program squeezed through the door. Then another. Then 5 more. Word had spread through the telepathic network that young Draconari shared. There was a place where you could rest. Really rest. Where nobody expected you to constantly prove yourself. Where being tired wasn't shameful. Soon Jack had 40 hatchlings showing up. Then 60. Parents started requesting transfers to his program. The small demonstration nursery couldn't hold them all. Vesa called an emergency council meeting. Jack was summoned, still in his worn work clothes, smelling like baby dragon and exhaustion. "Your method works," Vesa admitted, and Jack could hear how much it cost her pride to say it. "The hatchlings in your program show improved health, better emotional stability, and enhanced learning capacity. Even the skeptics can't deny the results." "So what now?" Jack asked. "Now we restructure our entire childcare system based on your principles. We're assigning 50 caretakers to train with you. We're redesigning all nurseries on all Draconari stations and planets. And we're offering you a permanent position as Chief Consultant of Hatchling Development." Jack blinked. "I'm a cargo hauler." "You were a cargo hauler. Now you're apparently the only human in the galaxy who understands our children better than we do." Vesa's tone was dry but not unkind. "The position comes with full diplomatic status, a substantial salary, and living quarters on any station you choose." "What about my ship? My trading business?" "Keep the ship. Modify it however you need. You'll travel between worlds teaching our people. Consider it trading in knowledge instead of grain." Jack looked at Kara, who smiled and nodded encouragingly. He looked at the council members, most of whom now watched him with respect instead of suspicion. He thought about his empty life before this, hauling cargo alone through the stars, running from grief he couldn't face. "Can I bring hatchlings with me? On the ship? Some of them don't do well with transitions. Having a familiar presence helps." 2 or 3 at a time with parental permission," Vesa agreed. "They'll be your assistants." "Teaching assistants," Jack corrected. "They're not pets or props. They're students who can help other students learn." "Teaching assistants," Vesa conceded. 6 months later, the wandering Margaret docked at Ember's Crown Station again, but this time Jack arrived as a respected figure rather than a suspect. His ship had been modified with expanded quarters, proper nursery facilities, and even a small classroom area. 3 hatchlings traveled with him now, including the smallest one who still preferred sleeping on his chest. They were adolescents now, bigger and stronger, but they still sought out his calm presence when stressed. The original 7 visited whenever his ship docked, now healthy young dragons training for their future roles as planetary governors. They called him Teacher Jack, though the smallest one still called him the quiet one, in the chirping dragon language. Vesa met him at the airlock personally. The reforms are spreading faster than anticipated. 15 colony worlds have already restructured their nurseries. Reports indicate a 40% reduction in hatchling anxiety disorders. That's great, Jack said and meant it. There's something else. Vesa seemed almost embarrassed. My daughter wants to thank you personally. Her hatchling, your first runaway, is thriving now. She wanted you to know that you saved her child's life. She believes he would have. Vesa paused. Young dragons can fade if too distressed. She believes you prevented that. Jack felt his throat tighten. He thought about his own daughter, lost to plague so many years ago. He couldn't save her. But maybe, just maybe, saving these little ones counted for something. Tell her I was happy to help, he managed. That night, Jack sat in his ship's quarters with 3 sleeping hatchlings around him and star maps glowing softly overhead. He'd come to space to escape pain, to be alone with his grief. Instead, he'd found purpose. He'd found family in the most unexpected way possible. Sometimes the universe worked in strange ways. Sometimes running away led you exactly where you needed to be. And sometimes the greatest strength wasn't in being fierce or powerful, but simply in being still enough that the restless could finally find peace.